Are the Colorado Avalanche an overhyped team? I'll get into why or why not in just a minute. But first, welcome to Plot Twists and Hat Tricks. I'm Amanda, hockey analysis book obsession. You miss 100% of the pages you don't read. This is the second episode, so if you're here, thank you for being early. Hopefully you already listened to the first episode, but if you missed it, go back and listen to episode 1, where I analyze why the Carolina Hurricanes won and skate my way through the first ACOTAR book. Here at Plot Twists and Hat Tricks, the episodes are broken down into 3 segments or periods. The first period is always hockey analysis. It could be about the NHL, it could also be about the PWHL. You'll have to tune in to find out. The second period is where I talk about a book. There are never any spoilers for the book being talked about. Finally, we have the third period, which, similar to the game of hockey, anything can happen, so I consider it my wild card, and it changes every week. Well, let's lace up those skates and take the ice. The first period is about to start. First period, President's Cup Trophy Curse. The Avs go from the best team in the league to being swept in the third round. So I'm going to start off with the Colorado Avalanche are my favorite team. I have been a diehard fan for as long as I can remember. I went to my first game when I was 3 years old, and well, I've been a fan ever since. I stuck with them when they went through their playoff drought, through the rebuilds, and was jumping up and down on my couch when they won it all in 2022. I really thought this year was going to be our year. I really did. We had the depth. We had the talent. Our failures from years past seemed to be solved, except for one thing that was majorly different. We won the President's Cup. For those of you who don't know, the President's Cup is awarded to the team that has the most points during the regular season. This typically translates to the most wins in the league as well. For the Avs, this year they led the league in points for, had the lowest goals against, had the most wins, most points, breaking franchise records. On paper, they were the favorite to be in the finals and add a 4th trophy to the growing collection. But they were swept in the Western Conference Finals by the Vegas Golden Knights. So, what went wrong? Are the Avalanche an overhyped team? Is there really such a thing as the President's Cup curse? Well, let's huddle up and talk about it. Let's start with what went wrong. Or rather, what went right? The Avs swept the Kings in the first round, ending Anze Kopitar's career on home ice. The Kings slowed down the Avs' typical play. Ultimately, our goalie Scott Wedgwood came up big, and the goalie on the Kings just couldn't handle the consistent offensive pressure. This has been seen in Edmonton in past seasons as well. It should be noted that the Kings have not made it out of the first round in several seasons. Granted, they have faced the Edmonton Oilers, who went to the finals the past 2 seasons in the first round. So to see the Avs kind of go down to the same level as the Kings play isn't exactly surprising, because they were able to do the same thing with Edmonton, where Edmonton ended up having the success. In the second round, the Avs performed a gentleman's sweep of the Minnesota Wild, coming back from a 3-goal deficit to clinch the series in Game 5. The Wild came off a 6-game series win against the Dallas Stars. They had a rookie goaltender, but the biggest concern for the Wild was they seemed to only be able to score on special teams, which is not necessarily to knock the Avalanche for their skill in penalty kill. They arguably have a better penalty kill than they do power play, but It's just the odds of having that extra guy. You can't be everywhere at once. You have that one man advantage. Goals just go in. But it was in the second round that we started to see the struggle with being boxed out. We also saw Cale Makar get hurt. So let's go to the third round, where the Avs got swept in the Western Conference Final, where I started this discussion. So Cale was out for the first 2 games, and Nathan MacKinnon got hurt in Game 3. A trend that the Avs were showing was they could not get quality shots to save their life. They were shooting outside of the house area. They weren't able to cut into the middle. The rebounds were being gobbled up or deflected by the defensemen, and they just weren't able to capitalize and score the way they had been scoring. I also think there was a coaching gap. So, according to hockeyreference.com, I looked up John Tortorella's coaching history, and where I'll talk a little bit more later in the episode on just the extensive history that John Tortorella has. He also spent the past 3 seasons coaching the Philadelphia Flyers, which is in the same division as both Sidney Crosby and Alexander Ovechkin, arguably the 2 best teams or the 2 best players in the NHL. So Tortorella was coaching against Crosby and Ovechkin at least 4 times a season. That is 8 games where he had to learn how to box teams out that wanted to cut into the center, to shut down those rebounds, to shut down those star players. So after facing Crosby and Ovechkin, MacKinnon didn't stand a chance, and it showed in the third round. MacKinnon was not getting quality shots. He was not getting the opportunities. He was getting so frustrated. And I think it was that experience that ultimately gave Vegas the edge from a coaching standpoint. And then we look at the team adaptability. For example, the Avs, in many cases, they would come out hard at least one period during the game, usually the first or the second period. But Vegas was able to correct their mistakes and come back even harder, meaning that they were able to make in-game adaptations that the Avalanche just weren't able to. Whether that is stubbornness or coaching ability, granted, if John Tortorella was my coach, I surely would not want to be losing, because I don't want him yelling at me in the locker room or pointing me out in the locker room. And I think he just had a level of respect. Not to say that the Avalanche do not respect Jared Bednar at all. I think he's a highly respected coach. He wouldn't be in the position that he's in for as long as he has been if the team didn't respect him. Even Nathan MacKinnon goes to his defense more often than not, blaming himself and the team's play rather than his coach's ability. But in this case, I think it was the team's adaptability that prevented them from winning a game in the Western Conference Final. Therefore, they were unable to make it to the Stanley Cup Final. So this begs the question, are the Avs overhyped? No, they are a skilled team, with each member of the team typically pulling his weight. We did see some players disappear in the playoffs, such as Brock Nelson, Valerie Nichushkin, Marty Necas, and in some cases, Brett Burns. But we also had a complete defensive collapse when Cale Makar was out. Cale is a very important player to the Avs in ways that I think the team didn't fully realize. From a fan standpoint, we see Cale is on the ice for power plays. We see him on the ice for penalty kills. We see him touching every aspect of the game. So it is not shocking when we are seeing a player of that caliber just essentially causing the team to collapse when he's not there, because he's touching every aspect of the game. He has a big presence in the locker room and on the ice. So it is not shocking to see that. but it's not something I would expect to see on a professional level. I could see that happening in college and maybe even in juniors or in the minors. But at a professional level, you should be used to having star players be injured to an extent, of course. And even though they are impactful players, they shouldn't have caused, or they should not cause such a collapse with the team. So let's talk about the President's Cup curse. The buzzer is about to ring to signal the end of the first period, so I'm going to leave you all with this. I am personally very superstitious, and if you are as well, then maybe you do believe in this curse. But if you need some facts to back up this potential curse, a team has not won both the Stanley Cup and the President's Trophy since the Chicago Blackhawks back in 2013. So maybe it is a curse, or maybe it's the trophy. Just puts a giant target on your back, forcing teams to watch more film and try to solve the team better, which results in them getting every other team's best performance. Personally, if I'm not believing in the curse, I would lean on that. I know that when I was working in hockey analytics, one of my goals was to figure out what beats a team. And when I look at the Colorado Avalanche, the best way to beat them is by not giving them the opportunity to skate the puck and forcing them to slow down their game, forcing them to take bad angled shots, not allowing them to get rebounds, not giving McKinnon the time and space that he is forcing, kind of put extra pressure on him. You will see that in film. If you watch enough games, you see that's kind of the key to shutting them down. So in a way, the President's Cup definitely could impact how a team gets others to perform against them, because it is a big deal when you're not a ranked team and you end up beating the best team in the league. Like, that's a big deal. And playoffs are just a completely different story than regular season. In my opinion, it's just a completely different style of play. You're playing the same team up to 7 different times. You are studying every single player and every analysis and how every player performs. So in the thought process of having the playoffs and the regular season being essentially 2 completely different seasons, I think during the regular season, you are adjusting just to get through that game. You want to get a point. Points matter more during the regular season. So if anything, you just want to force the team to go into overtime, because at least you get a point. Whereas in the playoffs, points don't matter. You either win the game or you lose the game. And if you lose the game, you don't get anything. And if you win the game, then you're one win closer to winning the Stanley Cup. So maybe it is a curse, because you are more likely to be watching the team that is winning all the games to try to solve them. Or maybe it's just because the playoffs are that much different from the regular season that how a team performs in the regular season has nothing to do with how they perform in playoffs. I clearly have my thoughts, but I'm going to let you chew on that as we head into the locker room for intermission. All right, that was a pretty intense segment. Let's all take a minute to take a breather. Let's gather ourselves. We still have 2 more periods to get through. Luckily, we are taking a trip to Perithian to check in with Farah to see how she is coping after the events of ACOTAR. Warning, there will be some spoilers for ACOTAR, which is the first book in this series. I will not give away any of the big plot spoilers, though. That being said, grab those helmets. It's time for the second period. So during the second period, we are going to be covering A Court of Mist and Fury, which is the second book in the ACOTAR series. The plot of this book takes place immediately after the events of ACOTAR. Farah is back in the Spring Court and connects with an unlikely ally to work through her newfound trauma and overcome surprisingly relatable challenges. So, how did I consume this book? My initial read through was an eyeball read, but I do really like the narration from the ACOTAR books, so I do typically tend to listen to audiobooks on the reread. It just helps me feel a little bit more immersed in the world. So, why should you read this book? This book is about beating the odds and learning how to overcome some of life's biggest challenges. But it's also about falling out of love and then back into it. Learning how to love can grow and change. This book personally hit me hard. Without any spoilers, there's a scene that felt like my past relationship. And that is a pretty common theme around a lot of readers' experiences. They will see their past relationship reflected in the first 10 chapters of the book. And I remember reading it for the first time and being like, oh, how Farah is feeling with this character is how I felt with my ex. And to be honest, when I read this book for the first time when I was single, it definitely gave me an unrealistic expectation for who my future boyfriend was going to be. And he was seeming to have to live up to unrealistic expectations. But ultimately, he seems to have lived up to the hype. So, points out to my boyfriend for sure. It's a very unique experience to be able to describe somebody in your life as a character in a book and to have people understand who that character is and to have that connection to them. It is also very powerful to be able to relate your current partner or really anybody in your life to someone in a book because of how they mean to you and how they are represented in the fandom. I would definitely describe my ex as a pretty typical character that is related to one of the characters in the book, but also my current partner is related to one of the characters in the book. We don't necessarily see these as often in A Court of Mist and Fury or ACOMAF or A Court of Wings and Ruin or ACOWAR. I definitely saw more of my current partner's personality in A Court of Silver Flames. So if you've read the series, you can probably guess which character best reflects my partner. But I think it also goes to describe how I view myself and where I am going to spend a lot of time talking about A Court of Silver Flames here in a few weeks. But yeah, I think ACOMAF, it gave me hope in a way, which sounds really silly, but it gave me hope that there can be good men out there, even if it is a fictional man. But I think that these books are more than just smut on the page, like a lot of people like to refer to them as. But it also talks about female empowerment. It talks about balance in a relationship. It emphasizes giving you the right to choose. And I think that is really powerful. And is this book more directed towards a female audience? Yeah, I would say so. But I think there's so much men can learn from this book as well. And yes, there are some fantastic sex scenes in this series in general, and especially chapter 55 is great. But I think it's because of the build up to chapter 55 that makes that chapter so great. And I think it is how the characters are introduced and how they interact that make it so powerful. And in my opinion, that is one of the superpowers of this series. So we've heard a lot of my thoughts, but let's just go over those a little bit more. So, among the ACOTAR fandom, A Court of Mist and Fury is definitely the number one book of the series. A lot of it has to do with chapter 54 and chapter 55, like I mentioned earlier. Chapter 55, super big scene. It's one of those things where if you know, you know. But for me personally, I think chapter 54 made it that much better. Like, I had heard of the hype of chapter 55 before I read the book. I kind of knew what I was going to be getting into. But how SJM or Sarah J. Maas like connected everything, I think is what made it so powerful. And chapter 54 is probably one of my favorite chapters I've ever read in any book, and is honestly what redeems ACOTAR. In the last episode, we talked about how ACOTAR is different on a first read than on a reread. And it's because of chapter 54 in ACOMAF. And I think that is really powerful, and that really changes how strong a book is. And in all honesty, like I said, it's more than just smut. And I can guarantee you that neither I nor my boyfriend are complaining about that. But this book is about overcoming not only your past, but learning how to love after abuse, especially when you didn't realize that you were in an abusive or toxic relationship until you got the distance from it. This book illustrates the power of found family and highlights the power of friendship in relatable ways that make you feel like you're growing with these characters. And that is really hard to do. I think, especially as an adult, you don't realize how hard it is to make friends and to really realize that the found family and your group of friends is something that you are striving for in adult life. I know that through reading, I have made some absolutely amazing friends, and I wouldn't have found them without this connection. And I hope that I'm able to cultivate, that's probably the word I'm looking for, some of those friendships within my own community as I do attempt to build it between hockey and reading, because I think there is definitely a place to grow in the hockey community, because where these books are definitely aimed more towards females, hockey isn't that much different. Like I've mentioned in the past, everything that I love about a great book is exactly what I'm loving about hockey. The unpredictability, how one choice can really change an outcome. And there are aspects of all of our lives that can be seen in these books. And with the romantasy genre in general, it is a little bit easier to relate to than just general fantasy. And I'm not going to just cover romantasy books. I have a whole list of books that I'm planning on covering. But I think starting with the ACOTAR series in particular, around the hype of ACOTAR 6 coming out, I think it's also just a great illustration of why I love hockey so much and how that also translates into reading. Yes, they are different, but the stakes are the same. Yes, you can walk away from the book and nothing changes, and hockey's in real life. But you're telling me that when shit hits the fan in a book, you're not getting the same feeling when your team is tied with 1 minute to go in the third period and it is an elimination game. Like, you're getting those same feelings. You can just get them whenever you want when you're reading versus having to wait for a scheduled time when playing. Okay, so the second period was a little tough as well. Not in the same way as the first, but alas, this game is turning out to be a little more brutal than expected. But we need to play the full 60 minutes. So let's grab our sticks and get back out there. The third period is about to start. All right, so for this episode's third period, we are going to talk about mentorship and coaching and how they are significant in both the book world and also the real world. This felt like the perfect third period to connect both A Court of Mist and Fury and what happened with the Colorado Avalanche in this year's Stanley Cup playoffs. So, in most series, we see the main character interact with some sort of mentor or coach. Maybe it's not in the most literal sense, but there's usually some sort of guide. In the ACOTAR series, we see many representations of this in the first book, and then we see this kind of changed a little bit in A Court of Mist and Fury. And so in the first book, we're initially seeing this kind of with Lucian, who is trying to guide Farah very softly. I wouldn't really consider him a mentor or even a coach. He definitely is in a friendship capacity, but he is trying to guide her in the best way that he knows how. But really, we see this with a character named Alice. She's a side character. She's not super present, but she also tends to have some of the most important lines in both ACOTAR and also ACOMAF. So, a reason why I am kind of focusing on Alice is because she, especially we see this in ACOMAF and even a bit in ACOWAR, she is really telling Vera how it is. And so Fantasy Fangirls, I absolutely love their podcast. They did a deep dive on the ACOTAR books, and they would call Alice Lisa from marketing. And I thought that was a great description of her. If you're in the business world, then you know that the marketing department pretty much has all the good gossip everywhere. And Alice, in a way, finds out the best gossip. But she, like I said, she also tells it how it is. And we are later learning in ACOMAF and then again in ACOWAR, there are characters that fit this role of a mentor and or a coach or a guide a little bit better. But Alice is what Farah needs at the time, especially when we first meet her in ACOTAR. And I think that's very typical for both real life and then also in books. The guides that we see are typically what the character needs at the time. They're not always going to be the ones that give you the biggest download, and sometimes you might not even catch them on the first read. In other cases, they are a lot more obvious and you do catch them. I'm thinking like Dumbledore from Harry Potter, or even Professor Lupin from Harry Potter, just off the top of my head. And but then at the same time, you have Harry's friends guiding him, and you don't necessarily see that when you read through the books the first time. You catch those on rereads. And yeah. So in hockey, we see this with coaching staff. We have several different coaches in a coaching staff, starting with the video coach, which is consistently reviewing film with the team, also reviewing film with the coaching staff. We most often, as a fan, will see the video coach talking with either the assistant coach or even the head coach when it comes to a coach's challenge. Typically, when trying to determine is a play offsides, or if the coach is going to call a challenge on a play for, like I said, either offsides, sometimes goalie interference, something along those lines. That's where the fans see the video coach. But in reality, the video coach is the one analyzing the game. He or she is pulling clips for the assistant coaches and the head coach to analyze, like, hey, this is where we can improve, or this was really good, like, I want to highlight this. And he or she is doing this for both the team they're working for and then the team they're also playing against. So the video coach is super important when it comes to the playoffs. So we also typically will have two assistant coaches, usually one for the offense that will specialize in power play, and then we'll have another one focused on the defense and typically will specialize in penalty kill. There is also a dedicated goalie coach because, well, if you ever met a goalie, well, they deserve their own coach. They are definitely a different breed. But in all realness, seeing the game as a goalie versus a player is such a different experience. And as a result, it requires a different approach. Finally, there's a head coach who kind of oversees all of the coaches and is usually the one making the big decisions, such as talking to the refs, challenging goals, making up the lines, coming up with a game plan, calling plays when needed, and even pulling the goalie. In a lot of cases, he or she is consulting with their staff, but they are the ones making the final call. So if you've been a hockey fan for several years or longer, chances are you've seen a coaching change with your favorite team, or you have heard of changes with rival teams. A question that I have been asked from newer fans, have overheard or just chatted with other hockey fans, is why is one of the first moves with teams when there's a poor performance is to get rid of the coaching staff or the front office staff? And with that being said, why are the same coaches and even front office staff essentially in a pool just bouncing around from team to team? There's not a direct representation of this that I have seen in books yet. It's something that I want to kind of focus in on. And maybe the best way to relate it to books is just the characters that are built are what are needed in the situation. And when relating it back to the NHL, maybe it's the teams trying to find that person to fit a mold when the author can just essentially create the perfect person for that role. Where I can not be 100% sure because I'm not in the position to personally be in the room when these discussions are coming up, but I can make some generalized assumptions based on what I know about the hockey community and how some of the teams have seen great success with changes and others seem to fall flat or there isn't a change. But I'm going to go through 3 real life examples to explain my thoughts here. So with example 1, I am going to start with the Toronto Maple Leafs. as of the 2025-2026 season, they have made a coaching change 3 times within the past 10 years. This started with Mike Babcock, who was recently announced as the new head coach for the Edmonton Oilers. Coach Keefe, who is we now see with the New Jersey Devils. And then Coach, I'm not even going to try that name apparently because it's just not going to come out today. Their current coach they've had since Coach Keefe left, I'd say like 2-3 seasons ago. I did confirm the timeline of these coaches with hockeyreference.com, and I did use hockeyreference.com as a fact checker to make sure that I wasn't just completely misremembering things. Anyway, back to Toronto. They also recently cleaned out upper management, getting rid of their GM and hockey operations. They also traded one of their core 4, which, as a reminder, at the time, the core 4 was William Nylander, Mitch Marner, Austin Matthews, and John Tavares. So they made all of these changes during or leading up to the 2025-2026 season, yet they did not make the 2026 playoffs. And in probably the past decade, they've only made it to the second round once, if not twice. And they've been known to have a great regular season, but are consistently first round exits and seem to have poor performance in the playoffs. They also haven't won a Stanley Cup since 1967, which is a pretty long drought, if I might say so myself. So I have some thoughts on Toronto. I don't think it is necessarily a coaching staff issue or even a front office issue, because if it was one of those issues, then this would have been changed. I think it is something going on with team dynamics, team culture, something like that. And reason why I'm thinking of this is because look at the success that Mitch Marner has had with the Vegas Golden Knights. He was a great player on Toronto, but he seems to have stepped it up a notch. And honestly, I think Vegas's culture is completely different than Toronto's culture. Toronto is definitely more of a hockey city, so there is some pressures that you will receive in Toronto or just on a Canadian team that you're not going to experience on an American team. And Vegas might have just been what Marner needed, but at the same time, I don't think that it is necessarily a staff issue. I think there's something going on with the team and that there's a team culture that maybe needs to shift because, like I said, if it really was like a staffing issue, then we wouldn't have seen so many coaching changes. If it really was a staff issue, then we would have started to see success after one coaching change. We would have started to see success after a front office overhaul. But we're not. The Toronto Maple Leafs got the first round overall pick for the NHL draft this season. So we'll see if maybe he can be an impact player. But there's something deeper going on in Toronto than just something going on with the coaching staff and front office. I think it's something going on with the team itself. It could be media pressure, which I wouldn't be shocked, but something else has to change there. They've made all the external changes. It's probably time to start rebuilding that team. For my second example is we have the same coaching pool. So typically, coaches tend to be with their teams for about 5 years, but there are exceptions to this rule. Currently, we can see this with John Cooper of the Tampa Bay Lightning, as well as Jared Bednar of the Colorado Avalanche. So earlier, we talked about John Tortorella and how he has been in the league for a long time, but he has also jumped from team to team. Again, I used Hockey Reference to confirm the timelines that John Tortorella was with each of the following teams, and they are as listed. So he was with the Tampa Bay Lightning for 7 years. He was the predecessor to John Cooper. He then spent 6 years coaching with the Columbus Blue Jackets, 6 years coaching with the New York Rangers, 3 years coaching with the Philadelphia Flyers. He, if I'm recalling correctly, was fired mid-season. This current season, the 2025-2020, well, I guess it's not the current 2025-2026 season because we're going into the 2026-2027 season. Numbers are hard sometimes. Anyway, so was with Philly for about 3 years. He coached Vancouver for 1 year, and then he coached with Vegas for 8 games during the regular season, and then through playoffs of the 2026 playoffs, and now it has not been announced with another team. Personally, I wouldn't be shocked if he goes into retirement. He even said in an interview prior to the call with Vegas that he was hanging out with his grandkids. And I think he might just want to be a grandparent for a little bit, which no shade to him at all. He's definitely had his success and he deserves the time off, but I don't think that seeing Torts with Vegas will be the last time we see him behind a bench. All right, let's talk about Mike Babcock. So, first things first, I know Mike Babcock is a controversial coach. He was hired with the Columbus Blue Jackets several seasons ago, but didn't actually coach during the regular season due to player complaints of invading privacy. I am not sure of what that investigation entailed. I do know that he was investigated by the NHL, and I know that he seems to have been cleared of the allegations, but I don't want to go too deep into it because, one, I didn't do a lot of research on that. I just know of the controversy. And two, I know he's an intense coach. I've been lucky enough to meet him once, and I was so scared when I met him. I was like, man, if there's anybody in the NHL that could kill me, it would probably be him. I don't know how to describe it, but he is a super intense guy. When I met him, he was super nice to me, but I could definitely see where he is very intense. So Babcock's coaching history involves coaching with the Anaheim Ducks for 2 years. His most notable coaching experience, though, was with the Detroit Red Wings, where he coached for 10 years, and then he coached with the Toronto Maple Leafs for 5 years. As I mentioned earlier, he was recently announced as the Edmonton Oilers head coach. All right, so my third example is former players becoming coaches. So there have been rumors that there are a lot of players that are currently playing in the NHL that we will see as a coach probably in the future when they retire. But one that I want to highlight, who is talked about a lot, is Rod Brind'Amour. He won the Cup with the Carolina Hurricanes in 2006 and was brought on as a coach in the 2018 season and has been the coach ever since. It is very common for current coaches to have played at the NHL at some level, or professional hockey at some level. There's several different reasons for it, and it's not necessarily that I agree with these reasons. I think there is some value to knowing how much it takes to make it to that level, the sacrifices you have to make, and the just physical abuse your body goes through playing in the NHL that can't really be matched by just playing college hockey. But at the same time, we're seeing the same coaches go from team to team to team, and their coaching styles aren't changing. And sometimes I think they're just being hired because, oh, they coached for X amount of years with this team. Oh, they won X amount of Stanley Cups. I don't know if that translates to just being a good coach, though. I think that there is room for the NHL to grow in allowing other people to coach to an extent. I know that Matt Carl, yeah, I believe. Watch me totally like go back and edit this and be like, that is not the person I was thinking of. He's the head coach for the Denver Pioneers. He has constantly been in talks of moving up to the NHL, and he is denied wanting to move to the NHL because he does like coaching at the college level. But people want to see him in the NHL because of the success he's had with the Pioneers, thinking that he would be able to translate that success that he's had at the college level to the NHL. And I'm not saying that that's not possible, but I would love to see some new faces. I think the game has changed a lot. I think that if we're looking at John Tortorella or Mike Babcock, for example, they have a different style of coaching than how coaching is being taught now and how players are being taught now. They're not meant to be as intense. You're not supposed to be having like bucket practices, as they call them. And that's just not the vibe that we have right now. And I think by keeping these coaches consistently in the league, we're not changing that. We're not adapting to how the sport of hockey is changing. I think we did see that with the Columbus Blue Jackets players standing up that Mike Babcock was allegedly invading their privacy. Again, not going to go too deep into that, but I think we're starting to see things like, or examples of this. And I wouldn't be shocked if something changes in the near future where we start seeing some new faces. But I think until that happens, some of the consistent issues that we're seeing, like Toronto, for example, are going to keep happening because we are just trying to fit a mold that isn't really there and that isn't supposed to be fit, instead of adjusting to what we have now. All right, guys, that is it. Thank you so much for tuning into the second episode of Plot Twists and Hat Tricks. Since we are a brand new rookie podcast, please rate 5 stars and leave a nice review, as it helps other hockey lovers and book enthusiasts find me. I am active on social media. Find me on TikTok and Instagram at PTHTpod, or email me at pthtpodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear your thoughts and ideas for future episodes. Until then, remember, you miss 100% of the pages you never read and the shots you never take. If you haven't already, go ahead and listen to the first episode of this podcast. And if you already have, the third one has already dropped. And I'm talking about Free Agency Frenzy, which is July 1st, or yesterday, in ACOTAR. Tune in now to see my takes. Bye, guys.